Arise now, ye tarnished, you are once again needed, because more than a year after Elden Ring's release, we finally have a name for the game's long-awaited DLC, and a cryptic teaser image, and no details, and no release date. It's fine, From Software, take your time. I've lots of other things I'm doing, all sorts of hobbies. My life hasn't been devoid of meaning since I finished Elden Ring, I don't know why you'd think it was. On the plus side, the long wait has offered plenty of time to reflect on the experience that was Elden Ring, and I hope put together a shortlist of some new features that fans would most like to see when Shadow of the Erdtree comes out. Besides the blindingly obvious, like more boss fights, weird new enemies, and a minimum of 5 new poison swamps. Thanks to the Elden Ring channel on the OX Supporters Club Discord for your suggestions and help with this shortlist. If you want in on that channel, by the way, viewer, you can find a link to the Supporters Club Patreon in the description. Elden Ring is so much fun when played with a friend, but cooperative play is limited by some of the trappings of the older games in the series. Companions can only be summoned under certain conditions and will vanish when a boss is defeated or when they die, and there's no entering caves and dungeons with a friend present, for instance. What's changed in recent times, however, is the emergence of the seamless co-op mod for the PC version of Elden Ring. This messes with the game's code to remove all those restrictions, and my word, is it a good time.
Hey, doggy.
Yeah. It works!
Hooray.
Oh, amazing.
Now, reworking the entirety of Elden Ring's co-op mechanics for when the DLC arrives is a huge ask and frankly seems unlikely to happen. Not to mention the DLC won't be free and charging players for seamless co-op would feel a little weird. But as Shadow of the Erdtree is certain to introduce a huge new explorable area of the game, it would seem perhaps more plausible that, in this new area, the rules of summoning could be bent a little more. Who knows, if From Software is building this region with different co-op rules in mind, maybe that's something that could be implemented, because I'm sure the appetite among players is there. If you need a story reason for it, maybe, let's see, how about the Glow-Eyed Queen has sent a cursed fog of seamless co-op? Yeah, that'll do. Type that up, Miyazaki.
Eaten from the inside by Melania's scarlet rot, his wits are long gone.
DLC for From Software's RPGs doesn't tend to just add new areas or boss fights. It does add those things, but usually wrapped up in a tight bundle of really impactful new lore. And that's what we want for Shadow of the Erdtree, because while I do enjoy scraping together a game's plot from item descriptions, I'm sure I'm not the only one who could handle a few more cutscenes and some more exposition on the power struggle between the main players in the lands between. Based on the teaser image though, that's exactly what we'll get. The following's all speculation, but the figure riding Torrent, or a Torrent-like creature, looks like Miquella, the brother of Hard-as-Nails boss Melania, cursed to endless childhood, whose last known location is inside an egg, having been kidnapped by Mohg Lord of Blood. Wow, what a sentence. Before being stolen, Miquella created the Haligtree, the very tough endgame environment that his sister resides in. And frankly, the Haligtree, or possibly a young Haligtree, is what this twisted oozing tree here in the teaser image looks like. Which means the DLC could involve a time jump, something previous games in the series have done with huge success. But whatever the case, it's clear Shadow of the Erdtree is going to go deeper into the existing lore, and hopefully it'll shine some extra light on the plot elements that need the most illumination. Replaying boss fights used to simply not be a thing in these games, but then along came a post-launch update to Sekiro Shadows Die Twice that let players replay major boss fights whenever they liked, which, if you're me, is never, thanks. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of bosses in Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and even Elden Ring that I would be so happy to never have to face down again. But there's one particular aspect of Elden Ring that would make a boss replay mode, or a boss rush mode, where you fight every boss in a row, really, really appealing, and that's the presence of Spirit Ashes. These are the ghostly AI companions you can summon in Elden Ring to help you fight, and they can completely change the way a boss fight is approached. The game encourages you to use them, and without summoning in a co-op companion, they're the simplest way to make the game's ludicrous boss fights a bit more manageable. Sometimes spirits die immediately and are hilariously little help, but sometimes, at least in my experience, they ended up making a boss fight a little too straightforward, especially in the late game when your summons are all powered up. And a magnificent boss fight can be over before you've even had a chance to get your ass kicked 15 or 30 times. A boss replay mode would give players a chance to test their mettle again under different circumstances, maybe this time without spirit ashes, or this time with. Of course, the last thing I'd want to do is drain all these memorable encounters of the impact they had when you really had to work to get to them. And perhaps seeing every boss listed boringly in a Sight of Grace menu would do that. But if it could be done in a way that doesn't remove the mystique, I would sure love the option to replay some of these brilliant boss fights, even if it's just to soak up the ambiance. If ambiance is an appropriate word to describe what's happening here.
Use it to traverse great distances.
Torrent is an exceptionally hard-working beast and has easily won his place in the heavenly pantheon of great video game mounts, sipping ambrosia and nibbling roa raisins with Epona, Roach and Aggro. And yet, for all that Torrent is vital for traversing the lands of Elden Ring, and for many of its most spectacular boss fights, the spectral steed actually feels, dare we say it, a little underused. I mean, I know these are tough, brutal games from Software, but not even making Torrent pettable? I think you went too far. It would be interesting to see a modestly expanded role for Torrent in the Shadow of the Erdtree. That could equate to mechanical changes, for instance new buffs and spells that make Torrent faster or more powerful to fight from, but equally I don't think anyone is going to bridle, no pun intended, at items for Torrent that are purely cosmetic. It might sound trite to want to dress your steed, but it would be cool if the DLC had something for this most endearing creature to say thank you for all the hours of lugging us and an inventory full of greatswords across the map. Also, Elden Ring, you're more or less tied with Breath of the Wild for best game of all time right now, and I don't want a lack of horse armor in the DLC to be the deciding factor, okay? Yep. Elden Ring is simply jaw-dropping in the number of character builds it lets you cook up. And while the DLC is nailed on guaranteed to be full of new weapons, armour, ashes of war, etc., there are certainly a few underserved categories we'd like to see more of. For instance, consider the enjoyably daft ballistae weapon category, powerful ranged weapons of which there are currently only 2 in the game. And while Elden Ring does feature bows, it would be cool to see a few more weapons and talismans that make archery builds more viable. On the magic side, how about more spells that reward equal investment in intelligence and faith stats, perhaps alongside a new damage type? And finally, when it comes to DLC weaponry, I hope that From Software isn't afraid of getting a little silly with it. If prior games are anything to go by, you'll need a fairly high-level character to access DLC areas, and it's nice to feel your efforts in these games are rewarded with weaponry so hilarious you'll want to dip straight into New Game Plus to play the whole adventure through with it. Now, I'm no geographer, but if I'm looking at Elden Ring's map and thinking about where a whole new DLC region would naturally fit, well, I mean, how about this enormous, conspicuous, great, cloudy mass of ocean? That would be satisfying, right? But there's good reason to want the Shadow of the Erdtree area to be plonked in the centre of the map, beyond wanting to complete what currently looks like a jigsaw with a piece missing. Namely, that one of the coolest moments in Elden Ring, or indeed any of the other Soulsborne games, is the point where you see a vague structure off in the distance and realise, oh man, I know where that is! I've been there! This world is brilliant! In the Dark Souls games and Bloodborne, getting to DLC involved being teleported magically away to an entirely different realm, not connected to the environment of the main game. And that's always worked okay, but Elden Ring is a bit special because it is the first one of these games to feature a map. It would be beyond cool to be able to stand on a divine tower in the lands between and see the new area nestled right into the world, even if it was just a low poly mass of textures, to save anyone playing just the base game having to download an extra 20 gigs or whatever.
O young yet towering sister of ours, let the birthing droplet in and create life for us. For all the Albinorics,
Elden Ring is packed full of weird and wonderful NPCs, almost all of whom have an involved and fascinating questline if you've the stomach to decipher their cryptic musings. Shadow of the Erdtree is basically guaranteed to add new NPCs, and perhaps even extend the questlines of the current crop of weirdos, so there's no point putting that in a wishlist. Instead, I'll opt for a suggestion that came via the OXSC Discord for an in-game notebook or log of NPC dialogue you've already seen. A diary feature like this would make it considerably easier, but not too easy I think, to recall to mind what each NPC is trying to achieve. Because let's be honest, there are going to be hours and hours between encounters with Vare here. It would be nice to be reminded of why exactly he's so keen on cutting my fingers off. Presumably it's very important.
Clench your teeth or something.
Again, the almost sarcastically obtuse nature of Elden Ring's NPC questlines is part of the game's charm, and I wouldn't want to put a dent in that, but consider that From Software did patch in post-launch the ability to track NPCs on the map, in a clear concession that in a world this big, with this many intertwining stories, players needed a leg up. I love the idea of a notebook of NPC dialogue to achieve the same end. The only problem is, it would feel a bit mean to withhold this feature from those who haven't bought the DLC, so apologies FromSoft, you'll have to just patch this one in for everyone when Shadow of the Erdtree comes out, please and thank you. Right, those are some of the features that we're hoping to see in Shadow of the Erdtree when it comes out, but what about you? Put your suggestions in the comments, whether they be huge new time travel arcs or tiny quality of life changes. Alright, thanks for watching folks, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Again, link to the Patreon is in the description, and we'll see you next time. Bye!